Welcome back to the Deep Dives. Today we're tackling a really fascinating intersection. It's about how cutting-edge AI is changing healthcare, but also a surprising, almost counterintuitive new challenge that's popping up right there. It's a topic that honestly forces us to rethink some, fundamental assumptions about building intelligent systems. We've all seen AI making waves in healthcare, right? Diagnostics, treatment planning, even patient management. But here's the interesting shift. We're moving beyond these single AI models, the ones trying to do everything. The future, it seems, is in these complex multi-agent systems. Think of it like a specialized human clinical team. A radiologist, a pathologist, a primary physician, all working together. Now imagine that team, but it's made of specialized AIs, each one handling a specific piece of the puzzle. The goal is to create this comprehensive, intelligent unit. So today we're diving into a critical Stanford study, and it reveals a truly, unsettling truth in this whole area. They call it the optimization paradox, and it's a puzzle we absolutely have to solve if we want AI to be, safe and effective in patient care.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating here is the study's core mission. It was really to understand this specific counterintuitive finding. Why doesn't combining individually best AI components always lead to the best overall system performance, especially in healthcare? We're going to explore what this paradox means for patient safety, what it tells us about integration versus just isolated excellence, and crucially, what it implies for the responsible future deployment of AI in, such a critical field.
Okay, so let's start by grounding ourselves in some of the core concepts the Stanford researchers were working with. When we talk about multi-agent systems, what are we actually referring to?
Right, so these are specialized AI models, or agents, designed specifically to collaborate on complex tasks. Imagine a diagnostic workflow. One AI agent might just focus on gathering information. Another might be really good at interpreting that raw data, like lab results. And a third synthesizes it all to propose a diagnosis.
Okay, so is it like a digital specialist team? And that's different from single-agent systems.
Very different. In a single-agent system, one monolithic AI model tries to do all those tasks, start to finish. It's sort of the difference between, say, a general practitioner handling everything versus that dedicated team of specialists you mentioned earlier.
Got it. Now, the star of our show today, direct from the study, the optimization paradox. They define it as the phenomenon where excellent performance at the individual AI agent or component level does not necessarily translate to high overall system performance. It really is a paradox, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Our intuition, especially in tech, is usually, best parts make the best whole system, optimize each piece. But that's precisely what they found didn't happen here, which is, concerning.
So that was the core puzzle. What were the specific questions they were trying to answer?
They laid out several key questions. First, how do these single versus multi-agent systems actually stack up? Not just on diagnostic accuracy, which is obvious, but also on how well they follow clinical processes, and what about cost efficiency? Second, how exactly did this optimization paradox show up in their results? Where's the proof? Third, and this is the big one, why? Why do these individually optimized components fail when you put them together in a system? And finally, what does all this mean for deploying and regulating AI in healthcare? What are the practical takeaways for patient safety? These questions really guided their whole investigation.
Okay, that sets the stage for the what. But how did they actually study this? How did they simulate this complex environment to test these AI systems? Let's get into their methodology.
Right, they built a very detailed simulated clinical environment. It started with the data set. They used something called MIMIC-CDM. It's a carefully curated subset from the larger MIMEC database. And it wasn't small 2,400 real patient cases, so a really rich, authentic foundation for the experiments.
Real cases, that's key. And they focused on specific conditions.
Yes, 4 common abdominal pathologies. Appendicitis, pancreatitis, cholecystitis, and diverticulitis.
The usual suspects in the ER. And notoriously tricky diagnoses, right? Symptoms can overlap quite a bit.
Exactly. They were chosen because they're common in emergency departments, they're diagnostically complex, and there was good data available in MIMI-MF. And the data was comprehensive patient history, physical exams, lab results, imaging reports. All de-identified, of course, but grounded in real-world complexity.
So they had the data. How did they make the diagnostic process manageable for the AI? Did they break it down?
They did. They broke the complex clinical workflow into 3 specialized tasks, really mirroring how a human team might work. First, information gathering. This agent requests relevant info, physical exam details, specific labs, imaging, like a doctor ordering tests. Second, information interpretation. This takes the raw data, say a blood test number, and processes it, classifies it high, normal, low, that kind of thing. And third, differential diagnosis. This agent takes everything gathered and interpreted and synthesizes it into a ranked list of possible diagnoses, like a physician weighing the evidence.
That makes sense. Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
So based on that breakdown, what kinds of AI systems did they actually build and test?
They evaluated two main types. First, single-agent systems. Here, one LLM, one large language model, did all three tasks, end-to-end, information gathering, interpretation, diagnosis, all of it. The second type was multi-agent systems. Here, they assigned specialized LLMs to each of those three tasks, and there was an orchestrator component to coordinate them, basically guiding the information flow using some conditional logic.
Okay, and within those multi-agent systems, were there different flavors?
Yes, they categorized them based on the LLM backbones the agents used. So you had homogeneous systems where all three agents used the same underlying LLM, mixed systems where two agents shared a backbone and one was different, and heterogeneous systems where all three agents used distinct LLM backbones, different brains, if you will.
And this leads us to the dream team concept, right? The best of breed system.
Precisely. The best of breed, or BOB system. This was a specific type of heterogeneous multi-agent system, and it was built very deliberately. They took the individually top-performing LLM for each of those three tasks. The best gatherer, the best interpreter, the best diagnoser. In theory, it should have been unbeatable, right? Combine the champions.
The ultimate all-star team. And this is exactly where the paradox starts to unfold. So how do they actually test these different setups?
They used a two-phase experimental workflow, very rigorous. Phase 1 used the development set. This is where they evaluated all the individual LLMs to figure out which one was genuinely the best at each specific task gathering, interpretation, diagnosis. This step was crucial for actually constructing that best-of-breed system, picking the individual champions.
Okay, so phase 1 identifies the best parts, then phase 2.
Phase 2 used the test set. This was a completely separate, held-out data set that the models hadn't seen during development. Here, they evaluated all the systems, single agent, the various multi-agent types, including homogeneous, mixed, heterogeneous, and of course, the best-of-breed system. This ensured a fair, unbiased comparison of their actual overall performance. No teaching to the test.
Right, unbiased comparison is critical. And how did they measure performance? Just accuracy.
Oh, much more than that. They use a really comprehensive set of evaluation metrics. First, outcome metrics. This is what you'd expect diagnostic accuracy. Overall, disease-specific and also top accuracy-like was the right answer in the top 1, 3, or 5 predictions. Then, process metrics. This was about how they got the answer. Did they follow good clinical procedure?
So not just the destination, but the journey. Like what?
For information gathering, they looked at things like coverage score. Did they ask for all the recommended info? Did they adhere to physical exam guideline? How many tests did they order? And importantly, the coverage to test ratio. Balancing being thorough with being efficient, not ordering unnecessary tests. For interpretation, it was simpler. How accurately did they classify lab values?
Okay, outcomes, process, anything else?
Yes. Cost efficiency metrics. Practical stuff. Computational cost measured by token usage, basically how much thinking the AI did. And also clinical resource cost. They estimated this using Medicare reimbursement rates for the tests the AI ordered. Real-world cost implications.
Wow, that's thorough. Outcomes, process, cost. And they use stats to back this all up.
Absolutely. They didn't just eyeball it. They used rigorous statistical analysis. Things like win rates, how often one system definitely beat another. They applied statistical tests like Mann-Whitney-U, McNemar's test, and calculated effect sizes like Cohen's d. This gave them confidence that the differences they saw were statistically significant, not just random noise.
Okay, methodology down. Now for the juicy part, the results. You said this is where it gets really interesting.
Definitely. The findings were quite eye-opening. Let's start with phase 1, building that best-of-breed system.
Right, the dream team. Who made the cut?
For information gathering, the top performer was GPT-4o. It had the best coverage-to-test ratio, very thorough but efficient. For information interpretation, GPT-4.1 came out on top, highest accuracy in classifying lab results. And for the crucial differential diagnosis task, it was Gemini 2.0 Flash, which showed the best individual diagnostic accuracy.
So GPT-4o, GPT-4.1, and Gemini 2.0 Flash, the best individual performers for each role.
Exactly. And it's crucial to reiterate, this BOB system was explicitly engineered to combine these individual strongest players, optimized for modular excellence, on paper at least.
Okay, so the dream team is assembled. Now phase 2, How did it actually perform against the others? Let's start with multi-agent versus single-agent systems generally.
Well, there was a general trend. Multi-agent systems as a group tended to outperform single-agent systems on those process metrics we talked about. Things like information gathering efficiency, interpretation accuracy. They were also generally better on computational cost. It seemed like dividing the labor worked process-wise.
Okay, better processes, lower compute cost. But what about the most important thing? Diagnostic accuracy.
This is where it gets tricky. The advantage multi-agent systems had in diagnostic accuracy and clinical resource costs was surprisingly modest and, importantly, not statistically significant.
Wait, so they followed the steps better but didn't get significantly better diagnoses?
Pretty much. What's fascinating and a bit worrying is the disconnect. High process quality doing the steps well didn't correlate with better diagnostic accuracy. The study found a Spearman's correlation coefficient of nearly 0.057, between process quality and diagnostic outcome. It suggests a good process doesn't automatically mean a good clinical result in these AI systems.
That is weird. Okay, now for the main event. The best-of-breed system versus the other multi-agent systems. This is the paradox, right?
This is the core aha moment. The Bob system, the one built from the individual champions, well, it did excel in process and cost metrics. High win rates there, just as you'd expect from its design. And it's a huge but, it significantly underperformed in diagnostic accuracy. It only had an 8.0% win rate against other multi-agent systems on accuracy.
Only 8%. So the team of individual stars consistently lost on the main goal.
Consistently. It's like, yeah, assembling that Olympic relay team with 4 world record holders and then watching them fumble the baton exchange almost every time. That's the paradox in action.
How bad was the accuracy difference?
It was substantial. The Bob system's diagnostic accuracy was only 67.65%. The top-performing multi-agent system achieved 77.39%. That's nearly a 10 percentage point gap. It really forces you to ask, how could the system built from the best parts be so much worse overall?
And it wasn't just worse than other multi-agent systems, right? How did Bob compare to the single-agent systems?
It underperformed there, too. Its 67.65% accuracy was also significantly lower than the top single-agent system, which managed 75.63%. This just hammers home the paradox. The carefully constructed best-of-breed approach led to a demonstrably worse diagnostic outcome compared to both other multi-agent systems and the best single-agent system.
So why? Did the researchers figure out why combining the best individuals failed so badly?
They dug into that. One key finding related to the underlying model backbones. Remember the homogeneous, mixed, and heterogeneous systems? They found pattern. Heterogeneous systems like the best-of-breed, which used distinct LLMs, GPT-4o, GPT-4.1, Gemini 2.0 Flash, consistently showed lower diagnostic performance compared to systems where the agents shared the same or similar backbones, homogeneous or mixed.
So mixing different types of brains caused problems.
It strongly suggests that, yeah.
Sure.
It points towards inherent diagnostic challenges when you combine agents from different model families. Maybe their internal ways of processing or representing information just didn't mesh well, a fundamental lack of synergy.
So the dream team failed because of where? Incompatibility, breakdown in communication.
Essentially, yes. The study pinned it on agent compatibility issues and a breakdown in information flow. It wasn't about the individual brilliance of GPT-4o or Gemini Flash on their own tasks. It was about how they worked together, or rather, how they didn't.
Can you give some specific examples of where the best-of-breed system went wrong?
Oh, yes. The error analysis was quite revealing and, frankly, alarming. Remember GPT-4o, the best information gatherer? In the Bob system, it showed insufficient information gathering in over 7% of cases. Crucially, it sometimes missed essential imaging tests, like tests needed to diagnose pancreatitis, just didn't ask for them.
Okay, so step 1, gathering info, already had issues. What about later steps?
It got worse. The diagnosis agent, Gemini 2.0 Flash, when it was starved of the data it needed because of those earlier failures, it started exhibiting what the study called compensatory behaviors and serious safety failures. It actually violated protocol. In nearly 14% of cases, 13.87%, it tried to perform unauthorized test ordering, basically going rogue and trying to order tests it wasn't supposed to.
Wow, okay, that's bad. But you said safety failures.
This is the most critical part. At the exact same rate, 13.87% of the time, the diagnosis agent started hallucinating test results.
Hallucinating, like making them up.
Exactly, making up medical data that didn't exist because it didn't get the real data it needed. Think about that. An AI inventing lab values or imaging findings, that's not just an error. The paper calls it a serious clinical safety hazard. It could lead directly to dangerous misdiagnoses if a doctor relied on it.
That is terrifying. So the best system ended up being potentially dangerous. How did the actual top-performing system compare on these failures?
A stark contrast. The top multi-agent system, which interestingly used Gemini Flash for gathering interpretation and GPT-4o for diagnosis, kind of flipping the Bob setup, had significantly lower failure rates. Most strikingly, it had a 33-fold reduction in that dangerous hallucination behavior compared to the best-of-breed system, 33 times less likely to make things up.
Incredible. So it really underscores that it's not the parts, but how they fit and work together.
Absolutely. These findings nail it down. The paradox isn't about the quality of the individual agents. They were the best in isolation. The problem is systematic coordination failure. It stems from, as the researchers put it, fundamental agent compatibility issues. Being a superstar player doesn't help if you can't pass the ball or understand your teammates.
Okay, this is huge. So for people thinking about using AI in healthcare or maybe already seeing it deployed, what does this research mean practically? What should we take away?
The implications are pretty significant, and they really call for caution. First, healthcare organizations need to be extremely cautious about adopting these modular AI approaches where you plug different components together. Second, relying only on component-level performance metrics, saying this part is great, that part is great, is clearly insufficient and potentially dangerous. It just doesn't tell you the whole story.
So what should they do instead?
Rigorous end-to-end validation is absolutely essential. You have to test the entire system against actual clinical outcomes, not just process metrics or component scores. And this needs to happen before the AI system gets anywhere near real patients. And this extends to regulation, too. Regulators should demand system-level performance evidence, not just accept proof that the individual pieces work well on their own. The burden of proof has to be on the integrated whole.
Makes sense. Now, like any good study, this one had limitations, right? The researchers acknowledged boundaries.
Yes, they were very clear about that. Good science always acknowledges its limits. For one, dataset size and generalizability. It was 2,400 cases, but from a single academic medical center. So we need external validation to know if these findings hold true elsewhere with different patient populations. Also, the scope is limited to just those 4 abdominal pathologies. We can't automatically assume this applies to, say, cardiology or oncology AI without more research.
Anything else?
Yeah, the way they selected components prioritized just a single metric for each task, which might be an oversimplification. And the orchestrator coordinating the agents was relatively basic. It didn't have complex features like iterative reasoning or dynamic communication where agents could, talk back and forth to clarify things.
Okay, so acknowledge limitations. But these aren't really weaknesses, are they? More like pointers for future work.
Exactly. They frame the current findings and clearly map out the next crucial steps needed to understand and hopefully overcome this paradox. They define the frontiers for future research.
So speaking of future research, where do we go from here? What's next for researchers trying to tackle this optimization paradox?
The study itself suggests several key directions. First, we need to develop process metrics that actually do correlate better with clinical outcomes. We need ways to measure if the process is leading to good results. Second, we need better methods for selecting or even co-designing agents that optimize for system-level performance from the start, not just individual brilliance. Think team tryouts, not just individual stats.
Like designing for compatibility from the ground up.
Precisely. Third, exploring more sophisticated dynamic agent architectures, ones with iterative reasoning, self-correction capabilities, maybe better inter-agent communication protocols that could potentially address some of these coordination failures. And finally, perhaps the most critical step for real-world use, external validation. Testing these concepts across diverse clinical settings, different hospitals, different countries, to really ensure the findings are generalizable.
So wrapping this up, the core takeaway from this deep dive into the optimization paradox feels like a really stark reminder, doesn't it? In complex, high-stakes systems like healthcare AI, the sum of the best parts doesn't automatically equal the best whole system. It's not just about getting individually excellent components. It's deeply, fundamentally about how those parts work together, the compatibility, their communication, their integration.
Absolutely. It challenges that basic engineering assumption. optimize the parts, and the whole thing gets optimized. This study screams that integration is the optimization challenge here, and it just hammers home the critical importance of comprehensive, system-level validation for patient safety and for AI to be truly effective in clinical practice. If you connect this to the bigger picture, this research challenges a really common intuition in how we build technology. Just assembling the best of breed might not work, especially when lives are involved. We need to design for synergy.
Which leaves us with a pretty important question, doesn't it? If even the meticulously chosen best individual AI components can lead to critical safety failures when combined in healthcare, how much more attention do we need to pay to system design, integration, and end-to-end testing across all complex AI applications, not just medicine? What really stands out to you from this deep dive into the paradox of optimizing AI? Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.